Go for it, Liz.
Great. Let me just get rid of that. Well, a big welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for being here today. I have been very excited about this, surprisingly, but I thought just to give an overview of what we'll be doing during the 2 hours, just so we know what's coming a little bit. The first is Sue Sol and I are going to have a conversation just to go into a bit of the background, which many of you were part of, around Eurythmy and social practice and how CDRA really shaped my practice of Eurythmy, grew it and helped shape it. And then we are going to look at this whole question of how we inhabit our bodies, our living form, and explore that in terms of its impact on our way of seeing and consciousness, and in relation to stories also around social practice, then how that would impact. And then finally, go into what you brought up, Doug, now in terms of where does the new arise? How in our living human form, where does the new arise? So as the last, just to give a bit of an overview. And in between that, it'll be movement and conversation and sharing. So a big thank you, Sue, for being here despite on your bed and and being prepared to have a little short conversation with me. As I said, I have been so excited about preparing. During my preparation, I realized what it was taking me back to those early years at CDRA and with CDRA, and the sense of coming into a group of people that I felt, oh, these are my people. And then I started looking at, so what was it that really drew me? And well, first of all, a huge big thank you to Elle for inviting me in 1999 to join the OD event and bring Eurythmy to the OD event. Elle, who I'd known for many years as a friend, but had never been in the work that you were all doing. And then Sue, I met you in that wonderful upstairs room, for those of us who were here last session with Keith, in terms of architecture as conversation. I was remembering sitting in that beautiful upstairs room in CDRA that held you in the space, in these couches, and then this enormous window. It was such that really would draw your attention to the mountain. So that thing of being intimately held in a space was so conducive to uplifting conversation and looking at that mountain. So that was very much part of my first entry into CDRA. And then to discover what drew me so strongly was that central to it, or central to this organization, this group of people, was practice. I was always and have been rather skeptical of people who have great and grand ideas, but then find it difficult to bring that into actually walking the talk. Perhaps because I struggle with that myself, but there was a group of people. You were actually starting from the ground up, from your practice. You were evolving your practice out of your very practice and growing it through reflecting on it and looking at it and observing it. And the other thing that really sparked for me was that I've always been drawn to following, practicing a path of spiritual inner development, but not one that removes me, sort of in those mystical paths that remove you from life, but one that will take me deeper into living more consciously in the world, in the everyday world and in life. And here again were these group, the CDRA, there was a whole organization. You were doing this very work of looking at yourselves as the subject matter for your own research. Yourselves, your context, your practice. You were really evolving it and working with that. So we were the raw material almost, and to actually start working alongside you in the OD events, in the facilitating development courses, in the biennials, to work with a group of people, this organization. You were dedicating time and resources to developing the individual human being as your sense of the most important, to understand how human beings shift and change and develop, and that you were absolutely essential as practitioners to doing the work yourselves. So that was for me such an incredible experience to come into this organization and the people that you invited to do it. And then, so we were sharing stories. I was thinking of all those lovely exercises that you then put together in your Holding Infinity book. But sharing biographies or sharing stories of practice, and the way we were encouraged to listen was to really pay attention to the details, but to then start to characterize and see what is that thread of wisdom flowing through all these stories. What is that thread? So that's where the resonance for me was with Eurythmy, because Eurythmy, we are always working with a very particular movement in the moment, but we constantly are then spreading our awareness to what is that bigger movement that I am connecting with, that movement that comes from the periphery, that flows through. So not just my movement, but how do I align myself with that bigger movement, and then both be shaped by it and shape it in the moment. So that sense of here is a social practice that suddenly I could start to see as a form of similar to the movement of Eurythmy. So what amazed me was not only was I learning the social practice through working alongside with you, but looking at Eurythmy through the lens of social practice, I started to see things in Eurythmy that I had never seen before. And to suddenly start seeing, oh my word, these movements aren't just great movements for us Eurythmists to move. We had learned lots of transformative forms and evolution and all that, but to suddenly see it, this is the embodiment of the whole picture of how development happens and how change takes place, and how, yeah. So it was a very exciting discovery that has really enriched and shaped my whole practice over these years. So my question is, I suppose for you, Sue, is how was it from the other side to be evolving your practice in this very disciplined and rigorous way? And then you worked with a lot of artists and different forms of art, but specifically to embody it through Eurythmy. So.
Great. Thank you, Liz. What a lovely opening. And I'm just going to have a quick check if it's still the case, but at some point I had a peek at yep, still here. We're 16 participants. And I know in planning kind of Eurythmy exercises with you and working with group 16 was always like such a great number to work with. So I thought, how wonderful that we are 16 participants, at least for now, but also that the participants that we are here today. And I have to say, this COVID thing, one of the things it does is it opens up a whole lot of like feeling, nostalgia, affective space that for me anyway is not always as accessible as it feels right now. And so I'm coming into today with this massive sense of nostalgia and also appreciation. And as you talked into what it was like to enter the CDRA space, both the social spaces and the physical, the architectural, the building space that Keith made, for and with us. I'm also looking at all the faces and the names of everyone here and being reminded of this incredible shared past that we all have, of entering space that is in many ways completely invisible. And even if it is a visible space, like a room or standing on a floor, when it's a particular one, it allows a whole lot of other quite wonderful insight and understanding that I realize in preparing for today, thinking it over, talking it through it with you, Liz, and rereading your paper, how much I actually just have come to take for granted that what I've learned through Eurythmy is just how the world is. And I sort of take it for granted about how I see the world, and especially rereading your paper, realizing, no, I learned that from you. So the stuff that I show up in the world with, the stuff I just take for granted. There was a time in my life when I didn't have it so beautifully articulated, but also so thoroughly experienced. And that time was before Elle brought you to work with us at CDRA through many of our events. So yeah, it's quite wonderful to be here. So I just thought I'd recap some of the programs that you were a part of, and there are others here who will be able to add to that. But the ones that, if I think about our key programs that we ran over the years, we had the OD event, which was the first program that you were part of, and that ran ultimately for about 10 years. We had facilitating development. We had the fellowship program. We had field worker formation programs. We had FOD. So there were a whole lot of programs that CDRA ran, certainly over a course of at least about 20 years, if not more, of its lifetime, where you were integral to, in this incredibly light way in which you hold your contribution and bring it, instrumental, I think, in helping shape our appreciation of what it is we're working with. And essentially it's what you've described here, this process. So that for me is the extent of my experience of how you worked with Eurythmy with us over decades, has been that it's been utterly formative. And yet when I was thinking this morning, something we learned from one of our other teachers, Mario, the stuff that draws us is often already living inside of us. And I think that's partly how we make community. If I look again at those of us even here today, there's something we share because there's something that we're already sort of seeing or sensing or looking for in the field. That's a word you use in your paper. And we find each other and we recognize each other, and we find the concepts and we recognize the concepts. And that enables us to associate with confidence and with warmth and with love. But then with the Eurythmy, we're given the experience, we're given the opportunity to experience that thing that we're already sort of nascently in touch with and nascently seeking more of. And yeah, I think that's also part of what the experience of the Eurythmy gave us. So I just wanted to bring out a couple of things that really jumped at me when I reread your paper, then I'm going to stop. I mean, the one thing was you opened with such a wake up, Can we really see and know what lies ahead? And you sort of playing on this phrase, moving forward. And again, those of us working in social process, we kind of idly, I think, sometimes not that with that much awareness, use words or phrases like, okay, everyone, moving forward. And then from the eye of a eurythmist, it's like, hang on a second. Have you thought about what it means to move forward? And yes, of course we can move forward, but do you know we can also move backwards and sideways, and we can even begin in our imaginations to be moving upwards and downwards. And so the sense of dimensionality of literal space, but also social space, is something so powerful in your practice and in how you've written about it so beautifully in your paper. So that's a big thing that stands out for me. And it made me think of the ocean. I have a friend who's an oceanographer, and the way he described being in the ocean to me is very much how you describe process and time and space in your eurythmy practice. So if you're floating in the ocean, you can literally kind of experience below and above, front and back, sides. And there's this like very powerful temporal aspect to being in the ocean as well, because it's got so much flow and movement happening in it. So there's this other dimension of time. And the way you do eurythmy, your social practice of eurythmy, enables us to experience all of those dimensions. So movement is not just something you do with your body, but it's something happening over time as well. And once you've experienced that through eurythmy, you can't unexperience it. I mean, it's impossible for me to think about social process without thinking about that huge multi-dimensionality. And you write it so beautiful, so beautifully. And it's left me with a question today. It's the question I come with, which is, can you see process without both the metaphor of physical movement, but more so the literal experience of physical movement? And I know there are more than a few people in this space that will say, yeah, obvious. We've been saying that for years. But it just arrived back freshly again for me today. How do we experience process without moving? I don't even know anymore. So thank you for putting it so freshly that it reminded me of that. Thank you for highlighting the practice aspect, which you've spoken to so beautifully. And for bringing in that element of infinity, the idea of being a participant, not just because we are inside of the situations we're studying, but also because we are becoming inside of those situations also. So our participation means that we ourselves are developing in the situations that we are, of course, observing, intervening into, helping shape at the same time. And, it's like once you've got that, and or you don't ever get it, you can have the experience and you can remember, but you have to work at remembering it. So now today I'm all remembered. I'm like, how can you see anything in any other way? I just sort of explain some of the difficulties I have with some of my clients and some of the contracts I might get involved with, because there's a lot of finiteness in our world of delivery. So that's it. The last thing I wanted to say was thank you for the way in which you do this work, because there's somewhere in your paper you talk about, the obsession with getting it right. And if you can let go of that and really participate in this ocean of process, that's when, that's, I suppose, paradoxically, when you're getting it right. And the way you do this, I think, allows everybody to enter in a way that really helps us get the point. So that's the last thing I wanted to say is like decades of being with you in spaces that you like teach us so much, and it in such a playful way. It's a gift. Thank you. I don't think I've did my brief at all, but that's me done now.
Thank you, Sue. No, what it just brings up, to finish off with that, this thing of being inside an ocean. That's my first experience of seeing eurythmy. I looked at this movement and I thought, I feel like I'm watching the sea. And as a child, I used to love watching the sea and being in the sea, and that sense of the three-dimensionality of movement. But the other thing that grew, you talk about being inside it, that was definitely, I can track my way of working from the early days where, it was bringing an illustration of life as a eurythmic exercise or something, and a metaphor, and then suddenly through working with you more and more over these years, realizing actually it is really about awakening faculties of perception. And you ask, can one really see it without that? But this mystery of the more one practices in that way, through the combination of the thinking and the consciousness into the movement and the movement in the consciousness, it's not just movement, it's that interface of consciousness and movement, and listening to the movement with a part of the whole self of ourselves, as well as understanding. And that's where CDRA's beautiful articulation of your practice, through the annual reports, through all those written works, that you were bringing it into an articulated conceptual form that then fed the experience, because just the experience is all great, but without that really fine, rigorous making sense of the experience, there isn't that quality of this, suddenly you experience that there's something growing within, like a plant within us. In that sense. So maybe that's a good place to go to the next, to start doing a little bit of the movement. And another thing that it was just wonderful revisiting, as you say, going back to what I know, and then remembering that what I learned from CDRA is this working with the elements. And this, what really struck me was that one annual report of working, that the basis of all social forming of relationship is warmth. So I'm going to try, and we're going to do a little movement with, has everybody got your ball, to try and warm this space, which already feels quite warm for me because of all the wonderful faces and that. I'm just wondering, Hope and Madly, is it possible for you to turn on for everybody to turn on their cameras? I know Justin can't because he doesn't have one, but it would be lovely to see you, because I'll need to move so that you can see me a little bit better with the ball. Has everybody got a ball? Hi, Hope. It's nice to see you. Hi, Madly. If you haven't, or you have a piece of fruit or even a piece of paper that you can crumple up into a ball. And many of you have done something similar with this, because I use balls a lot. But just to first be aware, just to pay attention, to open the doors of our senses. So these portals of our senses, pay attention to the feel of your ball, how it sits in your hand. You can show everybody your ball, whatever you have. Oh, beautiful one, Mary. and just experience it in different ways. If it's a fruit, you can smell it. It has that. So awakening this sensory experience, and then noticing what our hands almost automatically want to do, how we want to pass it between us. And seeing this movement of the giving and the receiving, actually, of what we are doing, as if we remind ourselves that with all human interaction, whatever we do, all social human interaction is really based, well, this is the principle underlying it all, is this giving and receiving. And just to become aware, just to observe the process, what is actually happening. There are two very different movements here, of the giving and the receiving, and yet they are totally belong to each other. We cannot do one without the other. There is no giving without receiving, and there's no receiving without giving. And if we look at the whole field of development and human development, community development, everything there is, and what has become basically the aid industry now, this is fundamental to it. So let's just really the act of giving. So pay attention to what it feels like in your body. Hi, Martine, how nice to see you. Have you got a ball? We're just doing a giving and receiving. Is to give, just be able to pay attention to the feeling in your arm of giving, and notice when you can see the ball. So this experience of giving and how you place it, connect with your movement. And now the experience of receiving. What do you have to do with your hand to receive? So be aware of the receiving side of it. And for a moment, put your ball down. we cannot receive with our hands like this. So let's just be experienced of what is the, again, we're working with the impact of our movement on our inner experience. What is the feeling here when you hold your hands closed and you just, with awareness, open to receive? Do that a couple of times. Just, and try and feel, is there an impact inwardly? I don't know about you, but there's a certain sort of bit of vulnerability here of this opening. And now go back to the giving. How do you feel when you give? Very different, quite different feeling in a way. But there's another way, and many cultures practice the other way of exchange. As I know some of you have done, this, not the giving and receiving, but the offering. And what do we have to do if we offer? The taking. And just notice the shift. And where you have to be active and where it's more passive. And if we look at the kind of power relations between, what is the difference between offering, you know, as an offering, we have to wait for somebody to take, so that. But now let's go back to the giving and receiving, and now we're going to connect with each other, is that be aware, being inside your arms and building up this rhythm. Notice what is the process, what's your ball doing, the pattern of your ball, this lovely big figure 8. And now we're all doing it in our individual time, but now can you connect with everybody else on your screen and try and align your movement with everybody else, so that we fill the space between us on all parts of the world, wherever we are, with this one movement, if we can. Timing wise, and get into the rhythm. It's side to side. Enjoy it. You can feel it in your body for a bit, and connect together. And I'll say a little poem that we will try and get our movement aligned to as well. Glory is most bright and gay, in a flash and so away. Feed apace then greedy eyes on the wonder you behold. Take it sudden as it flies, though you take it not to hold. When the eyes have done their part, thought must lengthen it in the heart. Thank you, and relax. Yeah. So I hope that's warmed you up a little bit, and it's lovely to connect, even though we can't give and receive with each other, to each other in that other way. So then I'd like to go into really exploring through movement. We'll do movement together. This impact of our movement on our consciousness. But I'd like to just read a paragraph from my paper as a introduction. That's near the beginning. This COVID time of world disruption is calling for an urgent and long overdue disruption in our worldview and way of thinking. We cannot do this by means of the same mechanistic worldview and abstract thinking that brought us here. If we are to awaken an alive, flexible, and mobile thinking, grounded in the particularity of the context in which it finds itself, we need a return to and through the body. Not body as physical chemical machine, nor as expression of purely personal sentiment, but as journey of discovery into the ineffable wisdom of the living human form, into the worlds that live in us and our innate connection to an infinitely creative, formative field as we stand, move through, and relate to each other in a dynamically alive spatial world. So I'd like to invite you now to join me in a bit of this journey of discovery into just some simple movements where we can start to see what is, to remind ourselves, for those who may have done this before, but to pay attention again. For me, the question is the way we inhabit our body, with the awareness with which we inhabit our body, can we intentionally shift that to shift our way of seeing and thinking? And for that, we need to first know what lives within us in our physical form. So if you can make some space, of just a couple of meters behind your screens, it would be lovely to see everybody again. Let's just get my screen the right angle so you can see me. It's a bit far away. There we go. Yeah, have a good stretch, James. Feel your feet on the ground, head in the air. That's great. So we know that we live in a three-dimensional world. We know in our heads we live in a three-dimensional world. We can see it. We know there is height, there's breadth, there's depth. We bump into things, it's got volume. So the physical world is a three-dimensional world that we know. But do we know the three dimensions? Do we know the quality and the nature of each of these worlds that we are formed by and that live in us? So this is going to be an exploration of getting to know in a different way, as Sue, you mentioned this, the experiential way of listening to my body when I explore each of these three dimensions. So the first dimension we're going to is this forward-back dimension, the one that divides us with a symmetrical left and right side, and is this plane that we are going to now explore. So be very strict with yourself. Visualize this thin, it's a very thin plane, forward and back, that goes infinitely forward, infinitely back. And you're going to step into that plane and briskly, not even moving your eyes out of that plane, forward and back 3 times. So just to get moving. And notice what it's doing to your consciousness. Again, let's see, with that forward back, really stepping out. And now the second dimension that we're going to explore is the horizontal. And our arms are most connected with that. So moving as if you have not just that I'm inside myself and my arms are moving, but can you pour your awareness into your arms so that you also have little eyes at the end of your fingers and all on your skin, and you are there with what does this movement, how does that impact on you? So spreading, you discover that it's all around. There's the horizon. It goes all the way, if we could see through the walls, all the way to the horizon. And be aware of how this, what sort of awareness and consciousness does this invoke in us? And now immediately go back into that forward back dimension and narrow down and walk it 3 times. Paying attention to what it does to you. And then immediately into the horizontal. And you begin to experience what is its nature, what are the qualities. And then relax. And then the third dimension, so related to our uprightness, to our spine, is how do we explore this dimension? So with your arms, you can follow the movement, and with your imagination, you almost have to go all the way to the stars and follow the movement down. Through your feet deep into the earth. Now with your arms, we have 2 arms, so we can go in 2 different directions at the same time. And you follow these 2 different directions, down and up. How it stretches us. And relax. Just paying attention to the mood, the quality and nature of that dimension. And now we're going to do one after the other. And we've been looking at them very individually. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the forward back. And instead of going just into the horizontal, we're going to add the horizontal. So part of us is keeping that forward back focus. And then we're going to stretch to, can we bring that awareness in? And then finally, 3 times of that. And then how do we stretch so we're above and looking down almost at the whole? So we're going to add the 3 together. Finding your space again, we're stepping into this infinite forward back line 3 times. And if we can somehow do it together, forward and back. Let's try to get it forward and back. And now we add the horizontal. Bring it in towards us, forward and out, while holding that directionality of the forward back, in. And if we can do it together, back and forward, bring it in. And now adding the vertical. So you're looking from way up top, and just with your experience, how is it? While keeping that direction and the awareness of the the periphery and the horizontal. Forward, back. Let's build up a rhythm so that you enjoy the word, like the waves of the sea we were talking about. And back. Let's connect the wave together and forward and back. Forward. But your feet are on the ground and your head's way up in the stars and forward. And I will say that poem again. Glory is most bright and gay, in a flash and so away. Feed apace then greedy eyes on the wonder you behold. Take it sudden as it flies, though you take it not to hold. When the eyes have done their part, thought must length it in the heart. Now, if you think about these three dimensions, where do they meet in us? Where do they intersect? Where in our bodies? Yeah, here, huh? Right in this heart realm. And where do you say I? So is it different to stand in the world as the sense of myself, I, just in my physical body, or is it different to be in the world knowing that we are held by these three fields, these three worlds, these three planes, which we can almost be reliant on to hold us. We are held here in these three planes and we are in the center of it. So now I'm going to do a little exercise. We will do it standing, but it's the same three dimensions, but just with our arms. And it's a wonderful centering exercise. You know, as a preparatory for going into a meeting or to, just to become embodied. So that it's with our arms. And again, we start with the forward back dimension. So bringing your arms, let's just build up the sequence. And now we meet the horizontal. So now we follow and we open to the horizontal. And now we meet the vertical plane. So we go up into the vertical plane. And now we meet the forward back again. So forward back. Horizontal. And then down on the vertical plane. So that is the sequence. And now can you move it? Because they're infinite, we can only with our physical arms do bits of the circles that they are creating. But when I go forward back there, imagine you have arms in your back that can go either the same, go both up or both down. You can, so be aware that you are standing within this infinite plane, but you're only doing it with your physical arms, but you have inner limbs of attention and awareness that you bring in your imagination behind you. So let's do that together again. And at the same time, be aware of where they're meeting, where you are in the center. The timing, we could do it together, forward, up. Be really in that dimension. Your arms behind you come to meet you. Now you're really in that vertical. And as you move, try and enter into the quality of each dimension. So really the focus of that forward back, the directionality. Open. just enjoy the experience of having created them around us. And now we've been doing it sequentially, but if you've ever sat and watched the sea or anything alive like that, a plant growing, it moves in many different directions at the same time. So when you've really mastered that exercise, a lovely exercise to really develop the faculty. So this is, again, we're talking about faculties now, of perception, that to stretch and exercise that faculty that is aware of relationships rather than things moving, or movement rather than just things moving. And what we can do is we start with our right arm, the same sequence, but we do it as a round between our two arms, as if you're singing. You know, when you sing, you have one person, one is, and then the next group starts with the next. So with the first movement, I'll just demonstrate, we take it up to there. When that movement comes there, then we start the next. But let's try and do it all together. And you won't be able to copy me. It's about how can you, where are we when we have to be at many places at the same time? So, the second arm starts. And try and keep the arms moving at the same time so that they reach their destination at the same time. One more sequence, if you can. Something to practice. And really pay attention to the space between your two arms and the movement and relationship. And relax when you've finished your sequence. So this is just a bit of, yeah, and we're going to stop the movement now for the moment, and I'm going to give you 3 minutes literally just to write down anything that's come up, because then we are going to go into conversation, in small group conversation afterwards. So just take 3 minutes to make any notes of your experiences. Okay, when you're done, we're going to have about 20-25 minutes in small groups now to share what, first of all, the quality, through your experience, what the qualities and nature of these three different worlds, the three different dimensions that live in us are. And also, you may find that you are more at home in one or two of these dimensions. That's also interesting to see, where do I feel more at home in this, in my own unique way. And the other thing is that, can you think of stories, incidents, or situations in your own social practice where one of these dimensions dominated? The quality of one of these dominated, or where it felt out of balance. And what did that look like? What was that experience? Can you try and remember the feeling in your body when you were inside that situation? Very much connecting again with the body, and what was that experience for you? And then the question, it is out of the past, so it's difficult to not know, but would it help to shift things by shifting one's own experience of oneself in one's body, by holding more of that balance, or going more into the other dimensions that were out of balance there? So trying to share stories, if you have three of the three different worlds, it may be a conversation, it may be a conflict, an organizational culture that you experienced, that seems to be moving primarily in one of these dimensions. And how does becoming more embodied in a more intentional way, inhabiting in a more balanced way, how would that help you as practitioner in such a situation? You can explore that. Even in your conversations, you can maybe do a bit of exploration. What is a conversation like that's only in the forward back, or only in the frontal, or only in this? What does a conversation look like that's only in the up down? So just to play with that a bit, and in small groups. And Matt, I saw you had your hand up. Did I miss something? Was it okay? Okay, thanks. But Doug, if you can, let's see, what is the time now? It's the hour. So maybe come back in 20 past the hour. Is that all right? Yep. Or maybe 20, yeah, maybe 25 minutes. What do you think? Yeah, 25 minutes, I think, will be nice. If they're groups of about 3. Yeah.
I've made groups of 4. Do you want me to make groups of 3 rather?
Oh, it depends. Yeah, maybe 3, because I don't think we have a lot of time so that everybody gets a chance to share. Maybe the smaller the group. Is that all right?
Yeah.
And I won't be in a group, and yeah. So how are the numbers?
Okay. Let me just. Okay, so Sue also doesn't want to be. Sue's still there. Hello, Sue.
Sorry, I'm going to have a little rest.
Shame, Sue. Thank you.
A lot of exertion. Thank you.
Easily rest. Yeah.
Yeah, just give me maybe if anybody wants to go and grab a drink of water or something.
I'll go and have to switch off our sound.
All right. Okay. I think we can do it. Oh, there's one more. 6. Okay, I think we have 3 now in every room. All right, rock and roll. Let's go.
Thank you, Doug. See you.
There you go. Sorry, I had to
We're
put
still
you in.
recording, Doug. Maybe you can turn off the recording now.
Good idea.
Bye, Alan Sue. Thank you for coming, Alan Sue.
Are we back in the big group now? Sorry, I just dropped off again because of the Wi-Fi.
Ah. Can you hear us, Kinkin?
Yes, yes, I can very clearly. Thank you.
So I just wanted to open the space for a bit of a general conversation and just what you found in your small group conversations, how it impacts on your social practice, stories of that, whatever you would like to share in the bigger group now.
Liz, may I please just interrupt? I've lost the main screen.
Oh,
I've only got the little blocks.
how do you mean? Can you see anybody?
I can see the
Alice,
people.
go to the top right. You'll see a little box there that says view, and you click on that and you go gallery, and it'll be back on the main screen.
Sorry. I get thumbnail video, then show active speaker, then I get show thumbnail video. That's all I've got. Okay, but oh, here we go. So sorry.
You're looking for gallery.
No, not there. Never mind. I can see who's speaking. Something happened there. Please carry on.
Okay, well, does anyone you want to start?
Liz, I don't mind starting. So there were a few things that came up. Some stuff was that in terms of our own physical body, we're more unconscious on the lower part, and then consciousness rises. And we're also more conscious in the front and less conscious at the back. And we're also a little bit more conscious on the right than on the left. The right is more like giving and the left is more receiving. So we walk around with this conscious and unconscious parts in us without always realizing it. And we had a really fun conversation. And one idea that kind of just arose was that normally when you're in an organizational process, you're sitting in a group and you're facing everybody. So everything is from here forward. And often you're sitting, so it's this part that's kind of on the interaction part. But if Martin was talking about what happens if the group loses its center slightly and wants to come to closure and conclusion about something, and kind of all goes very strongly in this front kind of upper region, And one suggestion that came up was that what would happen if we had a meeting and then towards halfway through the meeting, everybody that was sitting in a circle turned around and faced outwards, because then you would need to be aware of what's happening behind you more, and it might awaken something different. And then there was also this idea of like, what happens if we have a meeting, but instead of sitting facing each other, we walk around haphazardly, not in a circle, but just haphazardly, because then you talk as you need to talk and people carry on in the room, but just walking around. And what I realize is that often what you experience on your left is different to your right. And if you happen to be on the right-hand side in the group and you're talking, you're kind of more aware of what's happening in a different part of yourself to usually just this frontal relationship. And it might precipitate an interesting discussion as just a way of reconfiguring our orientation to ourselves in relation to the group. So that was, I don't know if anybody else wants to add from our group, but that was part of what we spoke about. Oh, there was one other thing. And that was when you were talking about like up and down and we were doing that and you said, where's your center? I felt that my center was a bit higher than here. And I realized that what you're speaking about are the archetypal centers. But in reality, our centers might actually be shifting depending on our predisposition. And actually, if I did that exercise more, I might be able to bring my center from there to here. And I kind of felt that my own center was leaning forward. This plane here was leaning forward slightly. And actually, if it came back to its original position, I would look out more and be less involved with what's immediately in front of me. So to presuppose that these are all in the right place is possibly incorrect. That our own centers go left, right, up, down. They kind of, they move around depending on our disposition. And actually, to become aware of, as you said, how you see yourself is how you see the world. And if you become aware of how your orientation is within space, you can become aware of how that colors your view, and how if you find the right and find your own real center, that you work from the heart, that you have this balance, that you're in this relationship between conscious and unconscious. So the transmutation of, as Martin was talking about, of like transmuting the earth, spiritualizing your intentions and your ideals, that process can happen more readily when you're in your own center. And we need to, finding your center is a process. It's not just, oh, here's my center. It's like, where is my center and how can I bring it to my centeredness? So that, yeah.
Beautiful. And that brings us again to the fact that we often trying to get centered through just our thinking. Whereas actually, as you're saying, this movement and the living form can help us to find it and feel, now I'm more connected. Yeah. Because we talk about being present and we often just do it in the head, try and do it in the head, actually. But it's such an embodied thing. Yeah. Thank you, Keith.
Can I just add something that also came out from our conversation, and it makes me think now that what you say, Liz, how the attention suddenly becomes a thing. You understand that where we grab as practitioners or inside a process, if our role is to hold a conversation, for example, is what role our attention plays in order to hold that kind of sense of centeredness of a group, and how do we deal with that? And I think it connects with what Keith was saying at the beginning of turning around and having a different experience of conversation. But how do we as practitioners hold a sense of awareness of what the group is needing in order to hold their own center, to hold that conversation alive and to stretch and to move in different directions? And we also spoke about how easily we try to get into quick solutions and become instrumental, and sometimes we have to end a conversation. So there's also a moment when we have to bring our attention into the center in order to get together into a place of something. So how do we move between those places together as a group, and how do we help a group of people to move into different moments of and holding our center individually and as a group in order to arrive together, not separated or not.
Yeah. Yasmin.
Yeah, so in our group, I think I just want to build on what Keith was saying about the center. I mean, one of the things that came up in our group was that often in our culture, being centered and in the center is valued, but actually it's a momentary experience, right? If you look at the infinite, the movement of infinity, when you give and you receive, at that point of centeredness, that's one moment, and the rest of the process is a movement that continues, and we spend most of our time outside of the center, right? The center is in that moment, and so that for me was really interesting, and it was also that we value being in the center or centered. But do we have tools for the rest of the time when we're out of the center? So that was one of the issues that came out of our discussion. And as Martin was speaking, he was saying that, you know, sometimes when there's a conversation happening, that, you know, there are unfinished conversations that happen, there's no time for those conversations to be finished. And I was thinking, well, what we could do would be to create spaces for unfinished conversations or incomplete conversations, right, in organizations, so that people can, after the process, find spaces and places to complete the conversations. So that's just my thoughts.
Thank you.
Maybe can I just add on from Yasmin? I was in the same group as her. I think the other insight that we articulated is that that centeredness that we value so much, it throws up also the question of sometimes if you lose center or you get off balance, or somebody said they sometimes get dizzy when they do that one exercise that you brought all the parts together, Liz, and that they were actually nervous in this exercise. Is that going to happen to them? But in reflecting more, we're realizing how sometimes being off center or looking sideways or being, you know, put to your knees and really vulnerable or whatever, sometimes the biggest insights come from those. So it's how do we value all of those parts and not only the centeredness? And then there's that ability to be in your center in movement and upside down and wherever you are. So it's a different meaning of centered again. So I think it threw up a lot of different aspects of what we're talking about here. And what you require if you're facilitating, or maybe sometimes getting pulled into your backspace or something else is what you need as a facilitator as well as the group, because it's going to give you that perspective. So it's how we hold the value of that whole when there's only certain things that are really valued in our culture in our dominant way. And then the other point that you raised also about thinking is that, especially with the one with all three, it wasn't possible to do it if you were thinking. You had to go into a place of awareness in order to even do the movements. So we were talking about that as well, the difference between thinking and awareness. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, Madly. Thank you, Michal.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thanks a lot. First for the exercise of the three dimension, that was really great. And in the group, I was with James and Vice, and that was actually great because with the exercise, we all felt centered in our body, grounded, and actually at peace. And in the group, we discussed the importance of the movement and the fact that in the African aesthetics, the movement is linked with the relationships. It's an aesthetics of relationships. And actually, we put an emphasis on the work of relationship and the massive centrality of to be a part of the work and to do the work. And actually, Vice is a gardener. And when she works in Africa, because she collaborates with many farmers on the continent, she experienced joy. And that's a dance together. When they are doing something together, when something needs to be changed, they are doing it in the movement. They shift in movement. But when she has to interact with the Western values, there, we are more in a dimension with hierarchies, with discussing, confronting, debates. And she said that she's actually tiring and that she's more comfortable with the movement and aesthetic dance of her practice of gardening with others. For her, that's the vertical dimension. And in this dimension, she's aware that she's growing with the plants that she's growing, but she's grounding with the plants that she's growing. She's grounding in this dance, and also in the awareness that she's doing all this stuff, all this dance, also with the cosmos, aligned cosmically. And actually, we discussed the fact that when we vibrate the movement, when we experience the energy, the frequencies of the movement within us, we become vibrational. And because we were in a devoted space where the movement and where the intention of our open hearts grounded, open a sphere and a dimension, a new dimension between us. And in this dimension, we experience a synchronization of our vibration and of our frequencies. We were actually at one, at peace, creating something better for ourselves, accessing inner universes within, but also creating an enlivened space for us to be. And actually for James, the vertical dimension is dancing the relatedness of life and being in the flow. And for him, that's more a challenge. The question now is how to get even closer to that flow every time, how to get to move further than making yourself great or in front of others, or the fact of you can be afraid of losing things if you are more in that dimension of receiving and of dancing, of receiving life, which is that is dancing through you. And actually, he was in a dimension shaped by hierarchy with discourses. And actually now he really valued the importance of doing the work, coming together and doing things together. And he said that in that you have all the elements of life, and that the flow is also coming by this way. You have to do things to gather these qualities in yourself. Actually, when you grow plants, when you dance with the cosmos and the energies to grow within yourself, but also to grow a plant, or when you do this exercise, this work to welcome this flow and to align with this flow into this into your life, you actually have to gather this quality in yourself and to create this space to welcome this space within yourself. And that's also a great work, an inner work, and that's awesome. And I just wanted to say that I am really, really grateful for this group, for the CDRA initiative. And James Taylor was saying that that was a kind of an ending. And as a young startupper, I know that I do believe that that we can change the world with arts, but also holding space. And I was wondering if, because I organize stuff like exhibition, and I am in several networks that unite all the so-called indigenous people in the world, if we could maybe find a way to experience to co-create things together, because you have such a knowledge, and each time I come, I learn so much to help me with my practice and with my way of interacting with people. Because in my work as a searcher, as an artist, as a businesswoman, I really want to actually encounter others differently. And my question is really, how can we encounter others without colonizing it on an equal basis? And actually, I think that we are doing the same job, trying to co-create this space within and without. And I would love to continue.
That would be fantastic. Thank you, Madeleine. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. This whole question of space and the inner and the outer space and the quality that is created through, particularly through the arts. Thank you.
I just need to ask something here. Just going back to the centering aspect, I carry in my being, when I go to the periphery, I'm actually going to the center. Or when I go to the center, I'm meeting there's a relationship between center and periphery. And I just wanted to throw that into the mix in some way, hoping that it'll come up.
Yeah, that mysterious thing that often the more centered you are, the more aware of the periphery you are. That it's not an either-or situation. Again, it's that whole quality, and that's why I think it's around. Yeah, we do bodily have sort of center, but that sense, what is centeredness, is how we are aware in that dance, even when we're flowing, as you were saying, Michal, off center. Sometimes it's lovely as a eurythmist to get lost, because then you see things very new, but how to stay within the awareness in that. Yeah. Kin, thank you. Got your hand up.
Thank you. I'm using my earplugs. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it comes and goes, but yeah, I think so. Let's give it a bash.
Maybe I'll. Better?
Yes, you're a bit sideways, but we can hear, I think. Yeah.
I was also thinking about embodiment, especially working with displaced and refugee communities in my country. Thinking about practice, thinking about the work that I do, it's also embodiment in, survivors' bodies, bodies that have survived conflict, have survived harassment, have survived trauma, or are going through that in that time and that place. And so to also if anyone has some insights to share as well on, and yours as well, is on how to be present to that in a more holistic way.
Yeah, having not worked with traumatized people in that way, it must be a real challenge. And at the same time, just also what I'm hearing and what I experience out of this conversation and others is this thing of entering and bringing rhythm and bringing healing through the body, through the doing, rather than just through the head and the reliving, and that there's something around, well, there are the therapies of like the trauma release, the tremor release, you know, that the body has, but there's something about just simple movements that bring rhythm that can be incredibly healing, whether it's a basic rhythm in living process, and so in Eurythmy is contraction and expansion, and just that breathing process, which can breathe through. Yeah. So quality of that, but yeah.
I just thought maybe I can jump in here because what Kin just shared kind of came up in our discussion around working with groups of people in spaces, mostly women, some that have gone through trauma, but for me in my work, I've realized an amazing thing that's come up from working. I work in the garden space. And in working with communities where the program is designed to actually focus and learn around planting and the indigenous plants and the soil qualities, but the impact of coming together in a natural space and putting our hands in the soil, or working with living material with plants, has opened up spaces of unintentional healing to happen. So in our discussions around that, in our group, we were sharing just how to maybe create more of those spaces, and it doesn't necessarily always have to be in the garden, you know, whether it's cooking together or creating craft together, something about being in action, whether it's moving in our whole bodies or just having our hands busy. But both of us shared that the feeling of having hands in the soil, on the one hand, really helped with this vertical plane, the grounding that is needed to hold a space as a facilitator, to really find, okay, if I'm out of my center, it's often because I'm being pulled in too many directions in the horizontal. And so to be able to center and become much more aware of what is it of me that is showing up. I can't control everything in this process that I'm holding space for and what comes up. But if I can remind myself to be in the vertical more, and that's a space where I definitely struggle to hold that awareness because of things being pulled aside. So yeah, I just thought to add that as a, maybe to give you some ideas, but also just to share that was what was coming up in the embodiment feeling. I definitely, the feeling of feeling very, very happy, kind of flitting around and, you know, in this ocean world, but the challenge of being very grounded at the same time, it brings a very different quality to this ability to connect and hold space. Thanks.
Thanks, Kani. And I see we are getting on in time. And I'd hope to do more around what some of you brought up, was the forward and the back space. But it would be lovely to hear from maybe a bit as the last, and then to finish with a little exercise around connecting with the front and the back space. So if we can do that. Rupert, yeah, what did you want to add?
Just a small comment that you know, Liz, what you've been trying to put into words and language around process and embody a kind of an embodiment of the invisible realm in a way, which is the backspace and up and down and sideways spaces that we're not conditioned to incorporate all those dimensions. But it's hard to actually have a language to talk about these things, and I think you've really done amazingly in trying to find those words to you know make this accessible and make sense of it. I'm just you know struck by for just to be part of this and having read your article, just to be reminded about how complex you know these situations are in which we work, how complex we are as individuals, and the enormous, you know, the magnitude of it all when you really force yourself to you know turn away from what you've been conditioned to think, like and really you know embrace all these dimensions and you know to see your body as a resource. You know that's a huge you know, it's a kind of a paradigm shift, you know, in a way, and it's been wonderful to be reminded about this. I don't know where I am in terms of that you know that journey, but I know it's certainly for me it's been quite challenging, you know, to work with my body in those in this way. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rupert. Yeah, and well, we may have 1 minute of time to do a little exercise, but to do that, oh no, I see people are, oh yeah. Bye-bye, James, I'm seeing you having to go. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. But I wanted that, yeah. So I was, just to end, can we take the ball and stand up again? And really explore this space of the back and the front space. And it's something you can explore more. In fact, whenever you want, there's a wonderful exercise of just, when your mind's going in circles, to walk backwards. But let's just finish together where we started. Thank you very much. And we're going to trace this circle with the ball of that peripheral space where you can see the periphery of what is visible in front of you. So all the things that are in front, and now take it one more time, but behind, so you can't see the ball, and follow your movement behind you. So enter this place of your back, which isn't, it's different from the space behind you, the physical space. And now do that, and you can step back into that space as the ball goes up. Go into that space behind you. And then as you come down, you go into the forward space. Bring it forward into you. See all the things, and then enter this place of movement and formlessness behind. Awaken that whole back part of you and forward again. And I'll say a little poem with it. Let's just do it one more time. And now as you go back, be aware of your back, but also of the front, what you can see, what happens to the world. And as you come forward, remember your back. So you're living on that edge. And it's a Rumi poem. The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the doorsill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. And just enjoy that living between the back and the forth and forward space. And yeah, as a little exercise to do in your own time, really explore walking backwards through the world. It is the most wonderful discovery. So thank you very, very much, everybody, for being here. And I see Catherine's just arrived. We're just leaving, Kath. But thank you so much, everybody, for being here and for all your contributions. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Liz.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.